Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis. I'm joined with my distinguished co-host, Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks so much, Pete. I'm so excited to get this rolling.
I know, right? This has felt like it felt like we've been planning this for some time now. But really excited, happy to have everyone here, and super privileged to be joining you to do this. Like, this is a dream come true for me. I've wanted to do a podcast for some time. And the chance for us to bring our knowledge together is just incredible. So thank you so much for doing this with me, and thank you for everyone for joining us. So maybe we should tell everyone a little bit about why we're doing this. Julie, do you want to maybe tackle that first, and we can kind of go from there, like what we're about and where we're headed?
Yeah, for sure. So I have the same feeling from the other side, Pete, about doing something with you. You and I have talked about collaborating for as long as I can remember in different things, and we've known and worked with each other over the years quite a bit. What I'm really excited about is I think many folks might not really understand the swim lanes of an analyst versus an advisor, and what different roles and different perspectives we bring, and we do, and they're very complementary. And where I might bring in client journeys and experiences from walking with clients through things, you have just this amazing intel and knowledge from being an analyst for so long and working in depth with the providers. And you put those two things together, and it's just so powerful. And I hope that folks that are joining us in this podcast will appreciate that and start to hear how powerful it is to bring those perspectives together into one place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we're both kind of polishing each other's apples here, but no, really, you're absolutely right. I learn so much every time I talk to you. I know I probably teach you some things too in the market, and
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're really about here, right? Like, the goal here is to create an environment where we can educate and inform and really engage with the market on what we see and what we're doing, right? I think we have two very unique perspectives from two sides of the coin. Consulting on the front lines out there helping customers, and then of course I've been working very closely and do today work for a vendor out there proliferating and helping organizations deploy and use these things. So I'm really just excited to share what I know, and we want to create a very sanitized environment, right? This is going to be super authentic. It's not going to be overproduced. But more importantly, it's not about trying to sell you something, right? We're really just trying to share our knowledge. I think the idea that came to me when I was thinking of the concept of all this was, we both do webinars, panels. I know you've done a lot of speaking. And I'm sure, right, you have people come up to you afterwards. They've got great questions. They engage with you. But it almost feels like there's not enough time. And there's almost like you can only answer that one question for that one person, where I feel like we, through this environment, we can now really sit down and unpack topics, right, that are front of mind, that you're running into, that I'm running into. That people want to really get help about. So and
sales free was something that's really important to both of us, because the best conversations that are happening are about journeys, or about what's missing or what's lacking or where folks are trying to go. And a lot of times thought leadership comes packaged in these commercial packages of sales things. And I think we both had a genuine want to separate all of that noise from the genuine conversations that were happening with practitioners and with, people that are in the front lines, doing new things and trying and having new learnings and success stories to share and failures to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And learn from that, right? That's what we want to do, is try and teach everyone, educate. And I want to learn. So, and I know you do too. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. So thank you for joining us, and hopefully you'll stick with us. And as we grow, right, we're going to figure this out as we go. Our goal is to come to you every month, maybe even more if we can. Really, share what we know, maybe bring in some guests at some point, and advance that way. But for now, it's going to be Julie and I, and we're really going to focus on wanting to engage with you, right? I want to make sure the audience knows we want you to engage with us and help us shape this. So you can reach us by email, hrpayroll20podcast@gmail.com. And that's a way for you to, certainly put in your feedback, ask questions, tell us topics that you want to hear, or just whatever, right? Just engage with us. We're happy to do that. You can also reach us on Twitter @HRPayroll2_O. And of course, we will be on all the major platforms, via Spotify, Anchor. We're going to be using to push that out. And you can always reach out to Julie and I individually. Julie, your Twitter handle is Julie FER_HR, if I'm right.
Yep, I think that's right.
Yep. And mine at Pete Tiliakis. So you can always engage with us there, connect with us there, and we would love to have your feedback. So welcome aboard. And here we go. So look, one of the things we're going to do right with our format is each week we want to kind of start with a little bit of industry news, what's going on in the market, maybe some happenings, maybe some acquisitions or whatever. And then we're going to jump into a topic, and we've got a great topic today. I'm excited about it. It's one that I'm dying to ask Julie a million questions about. And we both want to kind of dialogue on that. So welcome. So Julie, our industry news this week, I want to get your feedback on this. It's fall tech season, right?
Oh yeah.
I wish I could cue that wonderful time of the year music that you see, at Christmas. Because it really is, right? Like it's exciting to have these events back in person, right? Everyone seems to be buzzing about them. You're seeing the attendance really up, right? A lot of people saying they're going to be there. I think some of these events are bigger than ever. And it's exciting, right? We're all coming back after being off for a while. So I'm excited. How do you feel about it?
Oh, for sure. A lot of excitement and buzz about being together and meeting people. And to be honest, that's my favorite part of the event season, is being able to catch a lot of folks in one place. It's catching up with providers. It's catching up with, clients. It's meeting new people with new challenges. And I think that's what everybody's most excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's great. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the challenge sometimes is being able to either go to everything you want to go, or even worse, when they overlap. And Pete, I know you're in the throes of that. So,
so that's a great point. Overlap is a great segue, right? Like that's kind of the key thing here. I wanted to talk about. There's 6 major conferences happening just in the week of September 12th, right? Crazy. 6 big conferences. And I know we're going to be at some of them. I thought that was really interesting to get us kicked off, right? The season is going with some massive, shows that are all happening at once. And I thought I'd run through some of those, if you don't mind.
Don't mind. I'm focusing on one, just so you know, and so I'll let you talk about the other. But HR Tech is where I'll be focused for that whole week, and that's in Vegas, and it's always a big show. It's one of the megas, and so it's crazy that there are 5 other things happening that same week, and
I know.
I'll let you share those.
I know. I love HR Tech. I think this might be my 6th or so one I've gone to. I think it's a great event, right? Super Bowl of HR Tech. You've got all the vendors there, all the analysts, all of the consulting firms, just everybody in the industry really coming together, buyers, VC, private equity. There's a lot of different people there. I will be there, certainly spending time at that event. I'm also going to be down the street at SuccessConnect. I'll be speaking there. So I'd love to have everyone come and check that out. I'm going to be talking about, actually the title of it is Accelerate Payroll Transformation with Solutions from SAP and the like. So I'll be presenting on payroll in one of my favorite cities for events, Vegas. I'm a big fan. I know not everyone is, but I really enjoy it. And then, of course, Workday Rising. Julie, I know that's coming up. That's a big one. That's happening in Orlando. A lot of our team's going to be there. I'm bummed to miss that one, but happy to be attending.
Well, a little bit of a rumor on that one. I believe that attendance is capped. Live attendance is capped at that one. Really? I think what I've heard very recently is that if you aren't already in, you may not be able to get in. Certainly, I hope I'm wrong, but I do believe that's the rumor I've been hearing, is that the live attendance is capped this year.
Well, and possibly, right. And that's, I think I've heard that about other events as well. And so I think most, if not all of them, are offering some virtual options as well. So hopefully folks can get on that if they're not able to make it. There's also, so in addition to those 3 major events, right, there is also the NAPEO annual conference is happening out in, I believe it's California. So that's big for the, small market PEO kind of world. Along the PEO lines, right? TriNet's having their, I believe they call it PeopleForce conference. That's happening as well. And then, of course, one of my favorite events, which I think is a super unique event, is the American Payroll Association's Payroll Leaders Conference, is also happening over in Philadelphia, I believe. So hopefully everybody's getting out there and getting to at least one of these, if not maybe multiple. And I'm excited for it. I'm excited to get back out there. It's my first time on this side of the fence at events where I'm not going to be an analyst. I'll be a vendor, so it's a little different. But Julie, what are you looking forward to? Like, what do you got your eye on? I guess I would say while you're at HR Tech.
Yeah, so I feel like it's my duty to make sure that I'm making a round of seeing the latest and greatest, because folks, vendors in particular, providers are keen to showcase what's going on, what's new, what's great, what's differentiating, and so it's so nice to be able to see it all in one place at HR Tech, where you really can do that at that mega event. And then beyond that, there's always something, unique and interesting. Somebody who's thought about something from a different way, or a case study that just shines a light from a perspective you weren't really expecting. I don't know yet what that'll be, but I imagine, there's usually a couple of aha moments there. And the rest of my time, I like to focus on making connections and meeting folks that I haven't seen for a while, catching up on how their journeys are going, understanding where their priorities are. So I spend a lot of time doing individual networking in between, kind of the general duties to get caught up with the market.
What I love about the Workforce Agility Limited Series by Cornerstone was we talked to executives and customers all about skills. Cornerstone has a wonderful background in learning and development, training, etc. Their LMS is world class, but they've centered the business now, not just on that, like building upon that, but building upon how everything has moved to the skills economy. So check out the limited series called Workforce Agility, and you can get it wherever you get your podcast. And it's just a wonderful series where we talk to their executives on the shift of why, and also their customers that are using it. So check it out whenever you get a chance. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
how about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got my eye on a few things. So I'll tell you, so being an analyst, I learned to become kind of a professional event goer, if you will. It really does shape your, right? You've got to be real diligent as an analyst, because a lot of that, sometimes these events are your briefing maybe for a project, or, the various different aspects of that can be very important to something that you're working on, right? For that vendor. So, I learned to drain the value out of events. And by that, I mean, I maximized all the learning I could. I went to all the little breakout sessions that were possible, right? Where I wasn't already, maybe doing briefings or meeting with someone. I try to network as much as possible, right? I always go in with a little list of like things I want to see. And for me, this year, two things I've got my eye on. One is always payroll, right? Everyone knows that. That's my world. I want to see what the disruptors are. I want to see what's happening, what the competition is doing, who's new, right? There's always some new stuff there. The other thing I'm really keen to look into this year is metaverse, right? I'm really interested in where people are doing work around the metaverse and Web3 for HR. I think that's a very misunderstood, nebulous, confusing, and I would even argue that a lot of folks think it's childish, right? That it's just a game. And I disagree. I think metaverse and Web3 are the future of technology, right? Just that. Digital enabled capabilities, digital native capabilities. And I think you're going to see more of the metaverse dripping into HR than you might expect, right? We're already seeing a little bit of it in recruiting. Learning is big, right? With AR and VR, but just curious to see where that's going to go. So, any thoughts on that? You interested there?
Yeah, I am. And in fact, I think you're right to point out, somewhere I expect some of those ahas will be, has been a hot area for a while. It's been in kind of the recruiting candidate talent area. So I expect to see that. And it just makes me think about, it wasn't long ago that gamification was, kind of the buzzword, right? And it feels like that's kind of subsided a little bit. And I think you're right. I think metaverse might be kind of the reincarnation, like taking it to the next level, and we'll start to see a little bit of that.
It's fascinating. It really is. I mean, just the whole Web3 genre of technology and where the internet is kind of going next, right? Hence the Web 3.0 versus the 2.0 we're living in now. And I think the cool thing is about all of this is, and we're an example right now, right? It's creating a great creator economy where you can, really go out there and kind of be yourself online, and you can monetize that. You can, do a lot of things. But I think there's going to be a lot of technology in that world that is going to drip into HR. It's already dripping into products, right? I think Nike and some others are really advanced out there in this, and it's exciting stuff. So I'm excited to check that out. And then there's another area that I always spend time at HR Tech, and I would draw attention to anyone. Go hang out in the startup pavilion, right? That's where you're going to see the next stuff, right? Those are the point solutions and maybe even or niche solutions, I would say, maybe even disruptive solutions that you're gonna that you're gonna find. And they do have a neat little competition there that I think rewards them. I can't remember what they win. But that's a neat little area, right? It's a treasure trove of unique capabilities that are up and coming. Some you won't see there next year or the year after because they'll be bought or maybe they'll become something bigger. But that's an area I love to kind of poke around in. And as you pointed out, the networking can't be. I can't understate how impactful that is at HR Tech. I mean, it's literally a fishbowl of the who's who of the industry for you to connect with. So get out there and rub elbows and have some drinks and enjoy the festivities and get to know people and look for Julie and I. We would love to connect with you.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll be at SuccessConnect. If you're there, certainly drop by my breakout. I would love to have everyone included. And yeah, it's going to be a great week. So I'm excited. And, it's not the end, right? There's even more events I know that we have planned as our organization are going to be hitting. I'll be at the California Payroll event later in October. So plenty of opportunities to connect and get out there to events this year. So it's really exciting to see it all coming back to life.
That's right.
Yeah. Anything else on events, Julie, before we move on to our topic? I'm excited about this
let's
topic.
Introduce our topic because I'm a little excited about that as well.
Yes. So when we were looking at our first topic, I selfishly jumped at the opportunity to propose one that has always been on my mind and one that I know you know a lot about, Julie, and I want to dig into this, right? And that is the do nothing buyer or the buyers that end up doing nothing in a competitive bid, right? They go out to market. They're looking at technology or they're looking at services. And then, they often don't end up doing anything, right? They just end up sort of what I would call paralyzed sometimes, right? I've seen a lot of firms that are fundamentally stuck maybe with on-premise HR, core HR, or they're wanting to modernize their HR back office, whether that's payroll or some other areas. And they head off in these journeys, but then, with great intent, and maybe a case or maybe not, maybe a strategy, maybe not. It could be either ways. But, the reality of it is that there's a lot of them that just don't end up making it to that point and making a decision and moving forward. Yeah. My experience, that's been about a third of the time. But Julie, I'd love to dig into this with you, right? Like, let's just unpack this. I want to understand why it happens, how it happens, what do you do about it? So let's maybe start there. Like, how common is that? Is a third of the time about right? I mean, is that what you see? And is it different for maybe services versus technology, or is there a difference?
Yeah, that's so great. This is so exciting to start here. And I'll tell you my particular excitement about it is that, you and I both want this podcast to be about conversations that help people take action. And so having a very first episode where we really talk about doing nothing, just like it's so fun. Like, let's just get this do nothing out of the way. You ballparked 30%. I got to tell you, I might have even ballparked 40%. And I'm sure any provider out there has some official stats, right? As to how many pursuits go nowhere. But it's more common than you think. And I would start by saying no buyer is going to look at themselves and say, I'm that do nothing buyer, right? Nobody starts out trying to be a do nothing buyer or to end up with do nothing or take that road to do nothing. I do think you're right, though, to ask, is it different for tech versus services? And I have two different dimensions that I think it's different for, tech versus services. Yeah, it's a little bit different. Technology is actually more easily funded by companies. So, or more often mandated, more often, you need to get a new technology. Either something's, too old, doesn't work anymore, or, people are hell bent to, the overall organization is hell bent to get to the cloud, let's say. And so there's a lot less work to do to prove a business case or to define, the parameters of the services in a tech buy. And so services buyers, have to do a little more diligence, I think. And there's more to get to proving your business case and getting the right authorities in place, and you impact, the services as they're done today. So I do think there is a difference there. The other place where I think there's a difference is there's a difference by stakeholder group. And so,
Okay.
whether it's just the tech or the services, if the buy is being led by IT, that can be very different than a buy led by HR or finance and payroll,
Yes.
leading, or procurement leading, or shared service, right? And because they all have their own mix of motivations. So
it's a different experience for the vendor as well. I can tell you that firsthand.
Yeah, for sure. And then just even understanding, usually most buys, of course, will have a lot of players involved from those different areas, but figuring out and understanding who's got the power, right? Who's the influencer and how much influence do they have is something that's not easy to do, especially for providers. And it's really critical to get to that point. And internal teams don't always know it, right?
Agreed. Yeah. And the thing is, like, I always tell people this, who may be unfamiliar, is that buying HR services is very different than buying anything else. Like, I believe that. And I just from what I've seen, right? You're not buying staples. You're not buying paper, right? It's not that you're not buying servers. You're not buying IT. It's very personal. It's very impactful. And I also find that at the end of the day, you're never selling to one person when you're selling payroll and HR. You're always selling to a community of stakeholders. And you're right, it does create a bit of a complexity. So I think going in, understanding all those dynamics really can help you. In your situation. So. Yeah.
And the services buy is going to evolve in scope, right? So, most folks will start with the broadest scope possible, right? Or usually you start very broadly, and that scope is going to refine itself through the process. And it might refine itself differently with provider A than provider B. And that's something that, organizations that are used to comparing widgets or things that are very much alike or two software packages, they might not expect. And it's a real part of, how you get to the end solution, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's very important, I think, in tech and services, maybe more tech, but services as well, is for HR, I believe it's very critical that the use cases that you need, your unique use cases, that you need to solve, because most softwares are going to come 80%, right? They're going to hit most of the things that we need, right? But do those use cases align and hit the things that you not only need now, but you're going to be planning to do or need in the future? Does that roadmap align to that expectation? I think is very, very important too. So,
agreed.
This is good. So look, I want to unpack this a little further. So,
hey, this is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Practitioner Corner podcast. It's a wonderful podcast about the journey, the paths of how practitioners, both HR and TA, kind of go from high school, college, all the way to where they are right now. Some of the things that they've learned, how they've been successful, people that thrive around them, etc. It's a fun podcast. You'll love it. You'll learn from it. Subscribe to it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm George LaRocque, and I'm looking forward to exploring the critical trends shaping the future of work and technology with you over on the Work Tech podcast. Now, this podcast is a little different. I bring together industry leaders, innovators, and investors, and we go deep into market intelligence that matters to HR pros and tech providers alike. So give the Work Tech podcast a listen here on the Work Defined Podcast Network, and please subscribe if you like it. See you there.
What are some of the drivers of how we land at a no decision, right? Like, what are the flavors of do nothing? I guess if that's a thing. Like, what are some of the ways you get there? I suppose would be my next question. Like, how does this work?
Yeah, so I there are three that come right to mind for me, Pete. And the first is, if you have the wrong stakeholder engagement or inadequate stakeholder engagement, you quickly get to a point where you're herding cats, you're trying to influence other parts of the organization, and maybe as the lead of that by decision, you don't have that skill set, or you're not in the position to do that. That's up there as one of the top three for sure. Yeah. The next one, and I'll just rattle them out here in case you have some you want to comment on. The next one is really, if you're unable to make a business case or get approved funding, and this happens in HR all the time, you hear HR folks leading a project saying, it's not about the money for us. It's not about the money. And for HR, a lot of times it's not about the money, right? We're not the number crunchers usually. Yeah. But I can tell you, whoever has to fund and approve that project, it is about the money. So you can't lose sight of that because you're so focused on finding the right solution and having the right experience. And if you lose sight of the fact that money is a factor and you'll have to get it approved, then you have a greater chance of getting lost, right? Or doing nothing. And then the third one that I think is the next, in my top three, my big three, is if you don't have a tight timeline, you haven't really thought through the process, or you've allowed too much flux and your process meanders. If it's overly fluid, then you can get nowhere fast. I mean, there's just no incentive to kind of keep that moving, and things will always come up that kind of derail you along the way. And so there's just so many examples of that. So I'll stop there. Like, those are probably the three, like how to lose your way.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, what about like the lack of strategy? Because one of the things I see in payroll is a lot of times people say, oh, we want to do global payroll transformation, but like they really don't have a strategy, right? They just want this nebulous result that I don't know that they set out with. And we all know, right? When you're transforming, one of the kind of 101 transformation is have a plan, have your expectations, know where you're heading, all that sort of stuff. But how much do you think that drips into no decision happening? If I go into this and I don't really have a strategy, I'm just sort of, air quotes, transforming, aiming for transformation. Like, does that cause it?
For sure. And especially in global payroll, right? So you call that global payroll, because what most often happens in global payroll and HR, you have this ideal, right? So my ideal is I want to put all of my countries on one solution. Like, that's the ideal. And then, an advisor, an experienced person, somebody comes in, your lead, and says, that might not be very realistic. And, let's figure out what's actionable, what's the right scope, or what way, how do we stage this in a pragmatic way? And some, many folks don't want to hear that. Many leaders don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that, I can't just go from A to Z, in 12 months. So that's the importance of a strategy. And usually, you're somewhere in between, and you can't, you don't want to cut out the ideal of where you're trying to go, but you also do need to be pragmatic, or you're just going to create additional risk of do nothing.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah, totally. So let me ask you this. How about, all right, we've talked about maybe slanting towards the buyer somewhat here. Yeah. What about, say, the vendor, right? Do vendors have culpability when it comes to a no decision? I mean, I've been on the vendor side of things where we did everything we could. We bent over backwards. We tried to really work with the customer, and they just didn't make a decision, right? I actually worked on a deal one time, broad HRO deal, right? Back when everybody was kind of doing broad HRO deals, multi-tower, payroll was involved. I mean, like, everything was in, right? 18 months we pursued that, and they ultimately did nothing, right? Yeah. And I feel like we did everything we could, right? They just were, they had some internal issues that were just a mix of things that led to that. But like, where do vendors have culpability in this? And can they contribute, can their missteps kind of contribute to that outcome, a no decision outcome?
Yeah. I mean, there are for sure times when, let's just say, vendors blow it. Other times, it's not entirely their misstep at all. There are other factors. If you pick up on the whole idea of the meandering timeline, the meandering scope, or the ideal scope, vendors are challenged because you do have to answer the mail, right? If the client or the prospect is telling you, this is what I want, that's the solution they want you to bring to the table. But it's not a terrible thing to bring forward something that is, in stages, or pragmatic and actionable, as a first phase, and then into the rest. Not only from a pricing perspective, but from a solution perspective, it's very realistic. I think many providers are good at doing that, but sometimes, if you're really just trying to put it all in there, that alone can short circuit, a whole deal, and either gives them too much to think about, or becomes instantly too expensive, and and then you're done. Yeah. I think there's a couple others too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was going to say, clarity of the timeline, especially in a large transformation item, is really important, and vendors listen to what that is. But time, and extending that time also works in vendors' favors, especially if you're the incumbent, right? Yeah. And, a client has to get somewhere, and they're telling you, we have to be live by, or a system, is done as of this date. And And so, kind of taking their time up front with a timeline does short circuit the decision making by the client. And at times that's a risky move because clients will pull no trigger before they pull a very large trigger they're unprepared for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think vendors do a good job nowadays. I think today, if you look at tech or services, I think there's a modular nature to what you can buy, where I think the flexibility of that has created a little bit of easing for companies to not feel like they're being pushed into a box, but also not necessarily, and I would say more necessarily able to kind of customize and digest the transformation or digest the solution, whatever that is, over time versus having to kind of swallow it all at once, right? I think that's kind of the beauty of the modern day kind of interoperability of tech, but I think it's bled over into services. I've seen that a lot in HR services. So
yeah. And here's a lose it in the end, right? You want to talk about losing things in the last 5 minutes of the game or whatever. It's not uncommon for there to be little continuity from the sales to the contracting bit, right? There's different skill sets involved in different teams. But if you don't have enough continuity between sales and contracting, you can end up in a situation where in that ninth hour, the documents don't reflect whatever you've been discussing for 18 months or however long it took you to get there, right?
Yeah.
And so you get a client who suddenly is not sure that they're buying what they were sold or, and that can just bring things to a screeching halt, right away. Some clients won't notice because their teams shift, as well, right? Some buyers bring in their procurement teams and they don't even know if there's continuity or not. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, I know. Interesting. So let me ask you this. So we've talked about blunders, right? There's going to be blunders on each side, ill prepared, whatever.
Yep.
However we got here, right? Like, when does a no decision actually make really good sense? Like, when is it the right thing to do in a client case, right? Like, when do you find it where you would say, yeah, that was the right thing to do? Or, because there are times, right, when there's plenty, right? We could look at it and go, the buyer had this problem or that problem or poor expectations or, maybe the vendor made a mistake or whatever. But reality of it is when does it actually make sense? When do you want to make a no decision?
Yeah. And you've called out some good ones right there in the question, right? Maybe that's the difference between our ballparks of, 30% to 40, 45% might be it's really not a good decision. And so you should do nothing. Sometimes actually the most common, reason from my perspective for a good reason for a buyer to do nothing is their own preparedness. So if you're not prepared, if you don't have resources in particular, if resourcing is a huge struggle for you, or many buyers are in cyclical markets, right? Where, you have cash flows, in some markets better than in other markets. There are really legitimate reasons why, a buyer just shouldn't move forward because they risk too much in a poor implementation, a poor execution, cutting the scope too thin and not being able to, let's say, change your organization to fit a brand new technology is a great example in our space, where you could wedge in a technology, but you're not going to change any behaviors and you're not able to rethink some of the processes. And so, you might not get your ROI is a really good reason not to go forward.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I know there are some I'm sure there are some cases, and I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. I don't have one. A lot of the do nothing that I've been involved in has been sort of self-inflicted, but I can't imagine that I haven't been involved in at least one where it made sense. But no, that makes total sense. So let me ask you this. So, okay, we've made a no decision, right? You're in this situation, whatever. It doesn't matter how we got here. What sort of happens next? Like, where do you go from there? And like, are there tips you would have for recovering from a no decision? Is that the right way to call it? I guess.
Well. So first of all, if you get a no decision, you're kind of hell bent on, but I need to do something, right? So you're not ready to give up yet, right? Then I think some of the things that are go-to things to look at are, you talked about strategy earlier on. Mm-hmm. Do you even have the right strategy or the right scope, the right stretch? I see buyers then, go back and revisit the sponsor or the formation of their steering committee. Maybe you're trying to tackle a global scope, Welcome to the human role.
your go-to podcast where HR and payroll collide with innovation. I'm your host, Tiana Neal, and every month I'm diving deep with industry experts and change makers, bringing you real talk insights, practical tips, and fresh takes you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a leader, practitioner, or just curious about the latest HR and payroll trends, I've got you covered. Ready to roll with the best? Tune in for fresh perspectives, actionable tips, and the knowledge you need to roll forward with confidence. Subscribe now and let's transform the way you work.
Shared services or internal or external. And, really you need to start with North America because that's where your remit is. And, it's just too big to tackle the other. Another is on the resource planning areas. So if you don't have the right influencer leader or you're missing key roles and experience, that's a really good duck to get in a row when you get a no-go, and could be the difference, between going back and getting the right thing.
Yeah.
So that's for like the guy who's kind of headstrong, right? That's the company that says, oh, wait, I need to do something different. I'm going to continue to try to get a decision and not be a go do nothing buyer.
Yeah.
And then I'd say there's a lot of folks that, hit the do nothing, and it's BAU, right? It's business as usual for a lot of those. So, they might have hopes to revisit next year. They might, hope begin the budgeting process, right? Anticipating next year's budget happens a lot. In truth, a lot of them go to incremental process improvements or automations, right? And some of them, kind of take a different path and look internally at tools that they might have. Like, if you have ServiceNow in your organization, you can build workflows to kind of circumvent, and make an old dinosaur system last longer than, go for that. Or niche technologies like an onboard. I can fix onboarding if I get this, this app or this package. I can do something, right, to make that process better.
Yeah, agreed.
Or finding automation tools in-house, right? So somebody has RPA tools. They have Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere. They have chatbot services. Or if you can find a different way to make yourself more efficient until you're ready for something big, great. That's where most go.
Great point. Yeah, I kind of wonder too, like, if you suffer a no decision situation, right? Do you step back and to your point, it sounds like you start to think outside the box a little bit, maybe and also look inward to say, where could we maybe polish things up to make us more successful? I think that's a great point. And then is there a point where you come back out and you say, okay, now we're much more confident in what we're doing. We've got this tightened up, that tightened up. We know what our strategy is. Do you think that's a good idea then to come back to market once that's done?
I think it does. I mean, well, first, before you come back to market, you need to go back internally, right? And I bet that's where you probably get as much outreach as I do, where we're having conversations with folks and they say, can you just give me some market stats that say X? Because my steering committee isn't convinced or isn't sure, right?
Yeah.
And that's
everyone wants to go right to pricing.
Right. Right to pricing or something that shows, here's how much improvement, right? Here's how much better efficiencies. I mean, those are the things that I bet you get asked as much as I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so just to kind of segue off of this, right? Like I worked on one deal years ago while I was at Deloitte. I was a consultant, and we were brought in. Myself and a couple of other folks were brought in as a team when we did a system selection sort of review. This was when cloud was ramping up and taking off. Right, It was a system selection. They were on a burning platform, was going out of service, whatever, on-prem. Heavily customized, of course. So they were kind of limping along with that from a payroll and HR perspective. So core HR and payroll really needed to be upgraded. And I know they had some talent stuff and some other areas they needed to modernize, but really that core stuff was important. And then, of course, they were looking at HR outsourcing, right? Where could we get some improvements around core data maintenance, payroll, and I think time was maybe in there as well. And I'll be honest with you, it was interesting because I was leading the sourcing part of that, the services side of it, and some other guys were leading the technology piece. And I got into kind of starting to bring the vendors together. That I had some sessions with the executives to show them, what solution types I thought they needed, and the vendors that could accommodate their footprints and all that. and they had their preferences for some that they wanted to work with over others. And so we brought in a small little cadre of vendors to really do kind of a hybrid RFI, RFP. If you can imagine, we were skipping steps, right? But the thing that I found out from working with this vendor is that very big company, I won't say the name, is that they had done this previously, at least once, maybe twice. I think they had done it twice for payroll and once for more scope. And the point is about every 3 years, they were going to market and kind of doing this. And every time it failed. And it wasn't because of the vendors. It wasn't because of anything really other than cultural aversion to outsourcing, to be honest with you, if you wanted me to boil it down. I don't really think they wanted to outsource. But I think they were always kind of being pushed to benchmark and figure it out. And I thought it was interesting because I thought that the experience for me being in the middle of that as a sourcing advisor was I could feel the vendors' eye rolls, right? Like they knew this company, right? And they knew what they were doing. They knew they did it all the time. And so I guess my question here is how much do you see companies getting bad reputations in the market for doing this sort of thing, like maybe going out and maybe it is just a benchmark exercise. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as you're forthcoming with the vendor about that. But how do you think vendors and even sourcing advisors like you look at this when you're dealing with a company who does have maybe a repeat sort of no decision outcome for them for the same body of work?
Yeah, you really can get not only a reputation for a decision to do nothing, right? You can really hit the point where vendors won't play. And of course, most companies will say, but I'm logo X, right? Everybody wants my logo. And you'd be surprised at how many people think everybody wants their logo, right? Yeah. Some that bona fidely maybe everybody does, and others that certainly nobody cares, like it's okay if I don't have your logo. But vendors will stop playing at a point in time. And I would say more today than than 5 years ago. Because of they are more selective. Some, get a reputation. Some vendors get a reputation for not wanting to competitive bid anything. They just want to sole source things. So that reputation is really important, and you have to be careful because you don't want to be the guy that nobody will bid on. And if you are, if you do have that habit and you get folks to bid, you will really find that you pay a premium. Because you become known for your inability to follow through. If you can't follow through and stick to a timeline for a proposal or for an RFI, what are the chances you're going to stick to a go live timeline?
Yes.
It's pretty slim, So.
Yeah. I always admire vendors that are able to walk away from deals and say, we're not right for you or you're not right for us. I think there's something to be respected for that. But I do. I saw this myself, right, in that situation where the buyer had really kind of aggravated a few of these vendors. They entertained them. And they went through it, but I would imagine it wasn't really doing well for the future if they, because again, another no decision, right? It was just sort of like we kind of saw this coming. So it's unfortunate, but okay. So look, this has been fantastic. I could keep going on and on, but let's wrap this up with one last question, Julie. I want to kind of talk about how do you avoid this in the first place? Like, how does someone going along this journey, out there doing RFPs for whatever, like how do they prevent a no decision from happening in the first place? Like what are your kind of tried and true tips that you would say, you've got to do this to make sure that if you do this, you'll most likely avoid it?
Yeah. So let me just rattle off, what I would say are the top things. First of all, make a case for change. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can make a case for change. Like, in other words, your case is why the status quo is not something we want to do, right? Even before you're talking about the alternatives to change to. So, and if not, business case, of course, is important. Do the strategy, everything else. But there needs to be a case for change. The next thing I'd say is it's a signal to the market when you have some skin in the game as you go to market. So whether you hire an advisor or you have an experienced and a dedicated lead that is, that is dedicated to make this happen, that sends a signal that not only are you serious about getting it done, but you have somebody in place that knows how to get it done, and you're committing to a timeline when you do that. And so it does. I have many, many vendors that will say, we have a good feeling that this is serious and going somewhere because, they hired a person to do it, or they hired you to do it, or how, whatever. There's skin in the game.
Yeah.
Then the other ones that I'll rattle off are, build a timeline back from go live. You'd be surprised how many times folks haven't thought about, I need to replace my system by X. Do I even have time in my timeline to do a competitive bid and have enough time for implementation, right? I mean,
great point.
It's got to be realistic, because somebody who does this all the time is thinking about that from the moment you have a conversation with them.
Yes, that's a good point.
And my last one is just, don't fudge the stakeholder map and resource planning. So you got to have your ducks in a row. You have to have an influencer that's there. And in today's world of talent and the stress on talent and the ability to have the right talent in your organization, you can't expect people to double hat or triple hat or quadruple hat their way through running this big transformation project and, doing 3 other BAU jobs, right?
Yeah. Great point. Yeah.
Those are my top ones.
Yeah, no, I love it. And the last one I think is important, right? I think I would tell people, I would often say, people over product make transformation successful, right? It really does. You really have to put a lot of emphasis in the people and the resources, and you can't overstrain them and put them in positions to fail. The product will give them the vehicle to get to that transformation, but you need those folks that your SMEs, right? Your leaders and your subject matter experts to execute on this change. So yeah, no, that's awesome. Great advice. Yeah. Anything else you'd add before we kind of wrap up?
No, I feel like, let's talk about do nothing and then put that behind us so that we can focus, episode after episode on the things that we can do and the progress we can make and how we do get to something new and better.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this has been fantastic. I know I've learned a ton, Julie, and thank you so much. I'm so happy to be doing this with you. And thank you again to everyone who listened. Stick with us. We're going to be growing and we're going to be doing more like this. So if this is interesting to you, stay tuned, subscribe and check us out, and we'll be back with more episodes. So thanks,
great.
Julie.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon at HR Tech.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye.